Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all yet again another Vikings episode review right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly. And as always, here to bring you the latest in this week's Vikings episode review. And this is my review of Season 2, Episode 8, entitled Boneless. Now, general thoughts on this week's episode. I found the episode to be decent enough. Now, granted, it was a much slower episode, very dialogue heavy, but that's mainly because this week we got a lot of questions answered. Some questions I even posted in some of my previous reviews. Those got answered this week. So, yeah, not as much action, not as much intrigue either, but given that last week's episode, you know, the suspense, the tension was so high, and it ended on such a high note that, you know, now it's time to kind of slow things down so that we can build up to the next, the next peak of action. And I think that's what happened in the conclusion of this week's episode, with the ambush and whatnot. Now they're setting up, you know, for the conflict for next week's episode. So, all in all, decent enough episode. Now, things I want to talk about in this review. First thing I'm going to talk about was Lagertha's rise to power. We finally figured out how that whole thing went down, and you all will remember I posted the question. I think it was my review, my episode 6 review, when Lagertha finally killed her husband, and one of the men there helped her. You know, he assisted he assisted in the killing. And I started posting all these questions in my review about, you know, why did he do that? What was his motivation? Now, I am actually happy to say that I was right on one of those theories. The fact that he coveted Lagertha and that he wanted her to marry him and, you know, that sort of thing. But I did like that scene. I really dug it, especially because we saw how, I guess you could say, how we were reminded just how formidable Lagertha could be without having to raise her voice or, you know, lift her fist. She just exposed him, simple and plain. You know, she told him straight up. She said, you know, you killed my husband because he was insane, but you didn't even have the courage to do it while he was still alive. It wasn't until after I had already murdered him that, you know, you delivered the little final blow. Yeah, it's real easy for you to find that courage when your opponent is a dead man, you know. And she said, if you really did have that courage, if you really were about, you know, the things you talk about, you would have been Earl, not me. So I dug that. I dug that. Now, yeah, now this does sort of introduce the possibility that there could potentially be some type of mutiny underway, you know, some type of conspiracy or something like that going on that could potentially be a threat to Lagertha, but I don't think that'll be the case because, as I just mentioned, the guy we're talking about, he's a coward. So, no, I think he'll just, you know, toe the line. He'll pretty much find his place, or at least get back in it. So, second thing I want to talk about is the developments that happened in Wessex this week. We got introduced to Princess Gwynthryth, who is currently one of those biting for power over in Mercia, which was the neighboring kingdom that Egbert and King Al were talking about in last week's episode. You know, we heard about pretty much the infighting that was going on there. What I was surprised by is the fact that, you know, the king died and now his children are pretty much fighting amongst each other, but she's already killed her brother to sort of, you know, get a step in assuming the throne. And I was like, wow, because I do not believe that was very common back then, especially amongst nobles. You know, a princess killing her brother, who is the rightful heir, in order to assume power. I can't imagine that was a common thing back then. So that was pretty startling. But then what really tripped me out was how I mean, just her character. I mean, this broad is pretty, what's the term I want to use? She's unpredictable. Now the actress does a great job portraying the character, but you know, just her appearance, her mannerisms, speech. I mean, this is clearly someone who's a little off their rocker, and yeah, and that's a deadly combination when you take someone like that and put them in a position of power as high as she is. Yeah, deadly combination, and a thirsty broad at that. I mean, she wanted to be mounted by anything that moved. I was like, Jesus. Anywho, but what I really found interesting in that whole storyline was pretty much Egbbert's plan. You know, he invited her over to Wessex, and he pretty much told her, you know, hey, I understand, you know, you have people contesting you for the throne, so what I'll do is I'll send my son there to help you, you know, as an advisor. Send some of his men, but also I'll give you Northmen mercenaries to help in your cause. And and the second he said that, I was like, okay, so that is what he intended for Ragnar and his men to help him out with. But I'm not entirely sold on the plan, because remember, in last week's episode, he's talking to King Al about taking Mercia over and dividing it up between them. So maybe this is actually him implementing, this is part of his scheme against her, to remove her from the picture, you know, sending his men there with her trust, you know what I mean? That way there's no that way he can't be found out, or he can't be discovered. You know, it would never, the threat of an invasion or insurrection, that would never transpire, because they're supposed to be helping her. So maybe that's what the plan is. Get his men on the inside, and then clean up shop, wipe out the house, and then take it over from the inside out. Which is that's actually a pretty sound plan. Doesn't require much manpower. Him or King Al don't have to be there at all. They don't have to worry about bringing forth an army over there or anything like that. It's sort of the thing, it's like, hey, just put my pieces in place and this thing will play itself out. Another thing that interests me about the whole England storyline in this week's episode was pretty much Athelstan. And I'm starting to have second thoughts about the role he'll play in this whole thing, because now, see, I was under the impression that it will be something like Ragnar and Egbert would pretty much be pulling Athelstan one way or another, and he'll sort of be caught in the middle of it. Now I'm starting to get the impression that maybe Athelstan will sort of sit this one out for a bit. You know what I mean? He'll kind of fall back, go into the background a little bit, kind of stand back and watch things transpire, and then at that point he'll be forced to make the difficult choice of actually choosing a side. But I don't think he'll be as actively involved as I once expected, because in his scene with King Egbert more or less threatened him, pretty much. He let him know that Ragnar's here. I'm going to try to reason with him, and hopefully he'll do my bidding, and that'll be that. But if I get the slightest sense that he might cross me, he will be wiped out, and I want you to know that. Now, yeah, of course he's talking to Ragnar, but that's also a subtle threat to Athelstan, because he's letting him know, he's pretty much implying, hey, should this occur, I'm taking him out, and if you get involved, you will be dealt with accordingly as well. So, and that's why I think Athelstan got that, and I think he'll be more cautious and more hesitant to actually get involved. But we'll see. And so finally, that brings me to my final discussion point for this review, and that's pretty much what all's been going on with Ragnar. We open the episode with the birth of his son, who, as prophesized, is deformed due to Aslaug's little premonition, her little prophecy, which, once again, I mean, what else can I say about Aslaug? You know, just this. I really don't know what to make of her character, other than the fact that I think she's just an ominous persona. You know what I mean? Within this season alone, she's given birth to 2 sons, both of which she prophesied about, and both of them came true. And now, you know, it's too much with this whole supernatural mumbo jumbo going around. You know, she's throwing out these prophecies, you know, like it's Tuesday, like it's no big deal, and clearly it is. And we saw that, you know, we saw the effect that it had on Ragnar, how it rattled him, how it shook him. I have to imagine that at some point in time, this is all going to have to come to a head. I would have to imagine. Because I think that she could very well likely end up causing more harm to him than good. So this has to be addressed at some point in the story, I'm hoping. But I want to go ahead and I want to take this discussion more so just along the lines of what's happened with Ragnar, because of course we've seen him have to deal with, you know, his deformed son and whatnot, but now what I found interesting enough is sort of like where his story is going as far as the whole conflict with King Horik and whatnot, because last week was the episode where Ragnar started to get suspicious. Now this is the episode where he's starting to ponder that. We saw in multiple scenes, you know, he sort of remained silent, sort of kept his distance, as it were, and then in those final moments when he sent Thorsten to go and pretty much tell Egbert, hey, you know, we're back in Wessex, let's go ahead, let's meet up and whatnot. Clearly, Horik did not want that, and Ragnar knew that, but you know, now he's starting to sort of play his hand against Horik, starting to make these small, slight maneuvers to sort of figure him out, which I did find. I found that interesting that he, you know, he's starting to play with Horik now. You know, he's starting to play coy, or play possum, if you would, and of course, I have to imagine probably in next week's episode that conflict will finally come to blows, because now, as of the end of this episode, what we have had is the 3 heads of this raid, Ragnar, King Horik, and Lagertha. Now they have had a disagreement, because even Lagertha didn't agree with what Ragnar did, and that's caused tension amongst them. But of course, Ragnar's like, no, I'm gonna send my, send Thorstein out. He's gonna go ahead, send the message. They're gonna bring an envoy. We're gonna go ahead, do that, and we're gonna meet up. And Horik had Egbert's envoy wiped out and only spared his son. Egbert is going to retaliate. That's a given. He is going to retaliate. Negotiations might actually be out of the window now, because what's going to happen is Egbert, he's going to retaliate with extreme force. It's not just going to be, a handful of men, this, that, and the other. No, he's going to send an army at them. And Ragnar's going to have no choice but to defend himself. So, yeah, Horik setting up that ambush, that really did throw a wrench in Ragnar's plan. Yeah, it pretty much screwed up the entire negotiation process. And I think that Ragnar will confront Horik about that. And when that happens, that's when their showdown will take place. So like I said, I'm not sure if it's going to be this episode. I would suspect that that confrontation I'm talking about between Ragnar and Horik would happen in the finale, but we will see. So, like I said, all in all, wrapping up this review, like I said, decent enough episode, though somewhat slow. It's because there were information we needed to get out, questions that needed to be answered, and character interactions that had to take place so that now we have the tension that's going to start building, leading us into the climax for this season. So, I want to go ahead, thank you all for joining me again this week, and in the comments below, let me know your thoughts both on this week's episode and on next week's episode. Let me know what you guys think based off of the preview. What to keep an eye out for later this weekend, I have another small council live hangout that's going to be taking place tomorrow night, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. So that's 8 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast, 5 o'clock p.m. on the West Coast. I'll be joined with my fellow YouTubers and fellow Game of Thrones reviewers, and we're going to give our thoughts, our roundtable discussion on the previous episode, episode 2, The Lion and the Rose. Also, Saturday, I will be kicking off my new Game of Thrones character spotlight segment, where I will be dedicating a video to a particular character, pretty much in the same vein that I did with my favorite hero, favorite villains for Game of Thrones, my Ned Stark and Tywin Lannister videos that I did back in, what was that, 2011. So it'll pretty much be a video more so along the same lines. I will be doing 2, one for last week and one for this week. Those will be up on, the first one will be up Saturday night, the second one will be up Sunday morning, and then Sunday night will be the next Game of Thrones episode review. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off, and until next time, peace.